Hello and welcome. I'm Liz Booker, literary aviatrix, and today I'm talking with a general aviation pilot who in 1999 flew 14,500 miles around the circumference of the Australian continent. She shares her story in a pictorial travelogue interspersed with anecdotes, vignettes, and wisdom from her trip, available for purchase in PDF format entitled Plane Reflections. Fewer than 10% of pilots and aircraft mechanics are women. These are their stories of tenacity, adventure, and courage. Stories with the power to inspire, heal, and connect. Welcome to the Literary Aviatrix community, where we leverage the power of story to build and celebrate our community and inspire the next generation of aviation. Fran West, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm very excited to talk with you. And I'm so interested in this journey that you took and kind of the way that you packaged it for posterity and have it available for purchase electronically. So give us a synopsis of this book.
Well, basically, here's the book. Plane Reflections about life around Australia's coast. And the book isn't a day-by-day journal of the 3 months that my adventure took. It's a 64-page A5-side book sharing life lessons and photos of the flight because I'm a photographer. So I've included the highs and lows because people always want to hear about the lows. But I've also put in my weird sense of humour. As you've noticed from reading, I have the pilot to passenger and passenger to pilot little jokes. And that brings out other things. And I've just included the little gems of wisdom. So it's written both the pilots and non-pilots. And I'm not being derogatory here. It's just pilots and non-pilots. So I've written it so people can understand what a marathon flight involves without being too technical, because it's all right going for a NavX or a flight somewhere. But a marathon flight, when you're going for months at a time, doesn't mean to say you're flying every day, is a different kettle of fish. So that's basically it. Now, may I just read the introduction, because I think this will give people an idea of what the book is about.
Yes,
so,
please.
It's amazing how experiences in our life affect what we do further on down the track. When I went to Oshkosh Air Show and Convention in Wisconsin, USA in 1992, I found out that I could learn to fly a seaplane, a plane with floats that lands on the water, and that was in Seattle. I'm sure that I should have been born in the era of the old float planes and flying boats because I have such a passion for them. To actually fly a plane that landed on water was both a nautical and aerial experience. I'm still amazed that I didn't end up in the drink, jumping from the dock onto the floats. On my return to Naracoorte, South Australia, where I lived at the time, I discovered a set of 3 videos called Pelican's Progress. This was the first aerial photographic circumnavigation of Australia, made in 1978 by 3 amphibian float planes, planes that could land both on the water and on the land. Robert Raymond, the TV producer, also published a book of the flight called Australia, the Greatest Island. After viewing these videos over the years, and then captivated by the photographs in the book, I thought, what a fantastic coastline we have. And being a private pilot, ready for a challenge, I decided to fly around our coast too. So that's how my flight around Australia, Aus Flight 99, had its beginnings to celebrate the 21st anniversary of Pelican's Progress. From seaplane training, to viewing the videos, to dreaming, to planning, to actually flying. 7 years. Isn't 7 a magical number? Little did I know back in 1992 that a simple desire to experience something different would lead me well and truly out of my comfort zone. For me, the journey was not just a flight, but a life experience. And I have the photographs of the record. So that's the introduction. Would you like me to read another little bit? Or would you like to have a say?
No, I will. Okay, I will let you read one more excerpt and then we'll talk.
That's fine. Because I think this goes on further a little bit. So, and that will be the last bit I'll read. So, in this book, they're only a page or half a page or 2 pages at the most. But this is a page. It's called Dreaming Big, Reaching Goals. My mammoth dream was to recreate Pelican's progress. However, I had neither the time nor the money to do practice flights on my own beforehand in order to build up my physical and mental stamina. But as far as I was concerned, if Pelican's progress could fly around the coast, then I should be able to do the same. I was emulating a flight made by professional pilots who had much more flying experience than I had. They also had the support of a team environment. Now, team is an acronym. Together, everyone achieves more. They had their own photographer and they could land on water as well as on land. I was restricted to land only. My flight, done on a shoestring budget, with me flying the plane and taking my own photographs, certainly didn't turn out like their videos. Perhaps my dream was a bit unrealistic and seemed well beyond my capabilities. But if you don't set yourself a challenge, then you don't know what you're capable of achieving. As human beings, we don't tend to reach our full potential unless we're pushed by other people, our own desires, or circumstances. Because of the bad weather, I had to alter my goal as the journey progressed. However, I still managed to complete the flight within the 21st year of Pelican progress, but not within the original timeframe. I had to concede that I needed some company for part of the time, and from this I learnt more about myself and other people. For me, it was the journey, not the destination, which counted most. I knew what my destination was, the same place where I started. And I have come back feeling that I'm part of the land and the land is part of me. It's obvious that many Australians also feel this kinship with the land. Otherwise, they would not choose to live where they live, in a variety of remote locations. We all have a spirit of adventure within us, but we don't all realise it. I made a dream become a reality, and sometimes that was very scary. But if you want something badly enough, you find a way, in spite of the stumbling blocks, to achieve success. Don't just sit there dreaming. Wake up and make your dream come true. If I can do it, you can too.
The whole thing is incredibly inspiring. And that sense of adventure definitely calls a whole bunch of our community to flying and to take on an adventure like yours, where you're flying around the entire coast of Australia. So, my knowledge of Australia is limited. I did spend a couple of weeks there a few years ago, inspired by my interview with Kathy Mexted, who wrote the book about featuring Australian women pilots first. And then she has a newer book that talks about all kinds of flying that we recently discussed in the Aviatrix Book Club. And I timed my trip to come to the Australian Women Pilots Association meeting. And so on that trip, I got to see up near Brisbane and Sydney. And then Kathy lives near Hanging Rock. And then we went out west to there's a town with a sunken hole that looks like a garden, and I'm forgetting the name of the town now, but that's where the meeting was held. So I got to do a lot of driving around and got to see some of this gorgeous, especially the South Coast. And even took my son up in one of the little helicopter tours of the Apostles. So we got to see some of that stuff. And so I can imagine what it was like to do the entire coastline, how stunning it was. We can see the pictures that you took in 1999 in this book, which is really neat. So let's back it up. Who are you and what brought you to flying?
Well, it's a bit of a long story. Well, I'm 73, that's why it's a long story. When I was probably in my early, well, I would have been primary age, so it would have been the early 60s because I was born in 52. I was a member of the Channel 9ers children's show on TV, and they must have had a competition,
Oh,
and I won a flight from Adelaide Airport. So there were lots of other Channel 9ers like me who boarded a flight. I think it possibly was a Lockheed. I mean, it's so long ago, I don't really remember. But that was my first flight, and we flew in this big aircraft, well, big at the time, around Adelaide and environs. So that was my first taste of flying. Then I'll skip a little bit. In my early 20s, I took my mum up to the Flinders Ranges, which is several hours north of Adelaide. That's the capital where I live. And we decided to take a joy flight. So this was my first flight in a light aircraft. It was a Cessna, and we were flying over Wilpena Pound. And my mother and I looked at each other in horror when we saw the wings flapping slightly. So we didn't know that that's what happened with an aircraft. The wings weren't solid, still not doing anything. They were slightly moving, not quite like Voyager. It was much a bigger waving of the wings. So that was my first experience in a light aircraft. So we'll just back up. When I was a teenager and going to high school, I visited my Auntie Zoe, who lived in the same street as the high school. And every Friday after school, I would visit her and we'd have afternoon tea. And then before I left, she would give me one of her son's aviation books. My cousin John, unfortunately, died in a car accident when he was 23. He died when I was 3. So this is about 1955. John was killed in a car accident. He wasn't killed in a plane accident, but he was a member of the Citizens Air Force based at Malala, which is north of Adelaide. So John had this huge collection. So as a teenager, I would be reading about Douglas Bader and Amy Johnson and all these men who ditched into the English Channel during the war, and they were in their life rafts and they survived on drinking their own urine. I thought, no, thank you. But I was still enthralled
right.
by all these books about early flights. So when my auntie died, I inherited John's legacy of the books. So I still have all the books. So
Neat.
I went through high school, obviously, and then I went to Adelaide Uni and did an arts degree. And then I had to go to Melbourne to the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology to gain a postgraduate diploma in librarianship. So for me, flying was not ever going to be a commercial enterprise. I just wanted to fly for leisure because I'd set my heart on being a librarian. And so in 1978, I was able to start the public library down in Narra Court. So that was my profession, definitely not looking to be a commercial pilot or anything like that in aviation. But one day, the local aero club was advertising trial instruction flights. So I thought, well, maybe I should give it a go. And so there we have it. I went on a trial instruction flight, thought that was okay, and I just started to train to be a private pilot, and that was in 1980. But that's when I first started, and obviously over the years, I gained my unrestricted private pilot's license. And then through the years, I also tried out different things. Well, I started training in a Cessna 152. Our club aeroplane was a Cessna 172, so I graduated to the four-seater. But over the years, I gained a tail wheel endorsement in a Citabria. I had an ultralight license, and the instructor was based at Mount Gambier, so I used to go there and back from Naracoorte. And then I also gained the constant speed undercarriage in a Cherokee 6. So I've got that as a bit of a backup. I think it's been very interesting, the sorts of things that I've tried, because when I talk about my flight, I go out speaking, I say to them, yes, and I'm a pilot who doesn't like heights. And I think, oh, but I still like to try different things. It's different being in the aircraft because I'm in a little cocoon, and I'm strapped in and I'm safe, and it's different. So I tried those. The thing that I started that was doing something really different, because I think I should have been born in the, as I mentioned, in the year of the flying boats and planes like Catalinas and Sunderlands and so on. And so I went to Oshkosh and I went to a seminar and found out I could go to Seattle and gain a seaplane rating, which is what I did. So I'll just digress a little bit. When I gained my ultralight license, or when I was doing my first solo for the ultralight pilot's license, I had a very calm day. Now, I don't know how many people have done this, but it was a very calm day. I was off to do my solo. So I took off on the runway, the bitumen runway, came round, landed. It was a calm day, so I turned around and took off in the opposite direction on the same runway. Then I landed. I landed on that strip. Then I took the plane over to the grass strip. I took off on the grass strip, landed on that, then turned around and took off on the other direction. So I'd actually made 4 landings on the 2 airstrips. So I thought, well, that's pretty good, because how rare is that? And then my instructor, who knew what was going on out at the Aero Club, because for years I was the only woman who was flying. So he said he thought I was wonderful. He sent something to the local newspaper saying how wonderful I was, and he'd fly with me anywhere and so on. And it was really a bit of a and I think just having a go at the fellows out at the Aero Club. So I did have to put up with a lot of male chauvinism, and unfortunately, I don't know whether that still continues or not. But when I moved to Naracoorte, I did meet a fellow, and I married him. And after I started flying, he also started flying. But I didn't realise till much later that I'd actually married a narcissist and male chauvinist. And flying was not a joint passion. It became a competition. So you can imagine all the sorts of things. So after 8 years, I thought, I've had enough of this. But of course, I still lived in the town. He still lived in the town. And so you can imagine the sort of reception I got out at the Aero Club. So that's what I've had to deal with over the years. So that's a bit about me. So that's the bit before the flight.
That's a lot about you. Hold on. We got so many things to talk about. Okay. First of all, Mount Gambier. That's where the meeting was. So you
Ah,
rang the
so
bell in
that's
my
the
memory on that. So that was
Umphrston
cool.
Cave.
Yeah.
Umphrston Cave,
Yes. Yep,
that's it.
exactly. That's
Mm.
what I was thinking of. Yeah. So that was cool. Okay. Well, what better combination from my perspective than books and planes? So I just absolutely love that whole through line. It's reminiscent of many inspiring women who I've interviewed and whose books I've read who were inspired themselves by reading these aviation adventure stories from decades before them. And so I think that's really neat. And wow, you're on TV as a kid. That's crazy. That's a really cool experience. But the fact that you were a librarian and that books introduced you to flying in a real and genuine way, and then that inspired you to pursue it. I think that's wonderful. Um, there's so much to about what you said about your ex-husband. I think I came up in aviation in a professional context in the military, and I was already married. But I have uh, interviewed and talked to women who are, when you're, especially if you're young and learning how to fly and making it and pursuing it either recreationally, you're at that age where you might meet people. And so it is a small community. And, you know, if you get intertwined with somebody and it doesn't work out, that can be awkward, especially in a small community. So I feel for you there for sure.
Can I just say that for inspiration, you're talking about reading books about other women. I got onto this book called Pioneer Aviator, and it's about Laurie Bonney. Her name was Maud Bonney, and she was my inspiration because she was the first woman to fly around Australia, so called. Now, there's always definitions about things. Her flight wasn't like mine. She actually flew internally over the land. So she was the first woman
Right.
pilot to do that. Now, the thing is, this was in 1932. Now, her husband, Harry Bonney, would not let her drive a car, but he bought her an airplane. So she took off, didn't she? So she's really the
1932.
inspiration. And she flew from Australia to England, and she's the first pilot. I think that record still holds, still in the 30s, where she flew around the continents from Australia to South Africa. So she was a pretty amazing lady.
Wow.
So she's actually
That is.
my flying inspiration.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I look forward to I think we read about her in Kathy's book, but I'm look forward to learning more about her. So,
It's
yeah,
great.
thank you for
And
sharing that.
also, after doing the flight, I'm one of the recipients of the Laurie Bonney Trophy. So it couldn't have worked out better. So that
That's
was
right. Yeah, so let's talk about that. Okay, so you got excited about you were inspired about this flight. At the same time, I saw that you were involved with the Seroptimists. And so
that's
tell
right.
us, for people who don't know about the Seroptimists, what they are, what your involvement was, and how the trip was intertwined with that.
Okay. Seroptimists are a women's service club, and they started based through Rotary. So it's all for women. And I'd been in Seroptimists for quite a few years. And then at the time of the flight, I was actually the state president of Seroptimists International in South Australia. So for my
Okay.
flight, I thought I would just add a bit more pressure and combine it with visiting Seroptimist clubs where I could as I went around the coast. And fortunately,
Oh,
there
fun.
were a few Seroptimists who hosted me, and I can't thank them enough for that. So I tried to add that into the mix. So here's a flight that's emulating Pelican's progress. It's 3 planes, professional pilots, separate photographer. Michael, oh, no worries. Oh, I'll do everything. No, it doesn't work out that way. But hey, like I was saying, dream big. If it works out, that's fine. If
That's
it
right.
doesn't, well, that's the way it goes.
So tell us about the planning for the trip.
Well, the planning took a lot of time because I'm not a professional pilot. I don't fly very often, or at this stage. So I only had about 400 hours flying time over 19 years. So that's only about half an hour's flying time a week. Not very much, but I didn't think that was too hard. So I decided to compensate for lack of flying experience and perhaps skills, that I needed to plan as much as I could to be as safe as I could. So I had to go through 52 charts and maps. I did 67 light plans in advance, and I verified all the fuel spots, and I added in extra airports or airstrips that aren't listed on the main maps. So I really went to it to the nth degree. I rang up people, I contacted whoever I could, and organising this, I joke about this a lot, but Australia is such a big country. So if you turn Australia upside down, it looks a little bit like mainland USA. So imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the same size. So
Right.
I thought I can't do all this at once, trying to go through all these maps. I'll just get a basic map of Australia and I'll put a bit of string around it. And that's how I measured roughly what the mileage was going to be. So that's roughly that. So I had to verify all these landing spots. A lot of landing places have charges. There was one place on the Gold Coast, if I'd landed unannounced and not signed in by a member, I would have been fined $100 to land. I think that was it.
Yeah.
And other places were charging quite a lot, other places didn't. I had to have a drum of fuel waiting for me at Cedar Station in northwest Western Australia. And before I left, I actually rang up to make sure that the drum of fuel was there, because if the drum of fuel wasn't there because of the wet season or trying to get the fuel trucked in, well, I couldn't have done the trip. So it's all checking all the time. And then into the mix, I had to find out accommodation. So I am very grateful to the Throptimus who hosted me, to members of the Australian Women Pilots Association who hosted me. And the rest of the time it was just in caravan parks or motels or whatever was around. So a lot of time, and I think sometimes it's better to overplan and not need it than
Mm-hmm.
find you're up in the air, you're somewhere in a remote area, and oops, you've forgotten something.
And so that all that planning paid off, I assume, to the
It
extent that
certainly
you were
did.
able
It
to.
certainly did,
Yeah.
because I've come back to tell the tale. Now, one of
Yeah.
the things that I'm being presented with was a Spirit of Adventure Award from Australian Geographic magazine. And it was very interesting on that awards night because Howard Whalen, I think he was the manager or CEO at the time, he said, the main thing about adventuring is to come back alive, because there is no
Yeah.
point continuing on and losing your most valuable asset, and that's your life.
Yeah.
That's what people
I'd rather
need
be
to
an
do.
old pilot than a bold pilot.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So talk about the trip. Tell me, how did it start?
Ooh.
What were the highlights? What were the low points? Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, to start with, I'm a procrastinator. So I needed a goal to set myself.
Yeah.
So that's why I celebrated the 21st anniversary of Pelican's progress. That's
I
different
like
to
it.
saying one day I'm going to fly around the coast. I had
Yep.
a goal. So then when I told my mother and sister that I was going to do this, it's shock, horror. No, you can't do this. You have a death wish. You can't possibly do this. Why
Oh,
are you doing this? Then I had to hire the club Cessna 172. Fortunately, it was a 172 piece, so that was a Cessna with 7 hours worth of flying time. Sure. The atmosphere out at the Aero Club was obviously not terribly conducive to saying good luck. No, it was quite the opposite. So because I started 2 days late because of the weather, it started a domino effect. So all the bookings that I'd done, I had to redo. And then, of course, I had
yeah,
the pressure of taking the club plane away, or I mustn't crash the plane or do anything terrible to it. And of course, I've had
of course.
years of psychological damage done to me. So I carried all this weight in the plane with me, and it built up over time. And so my flight was done in a La Nina cycle, and Pelican's progress was done in an El Nino cycle. So I say to people when I'm talking, I'm a fair weather pilot. I don't like rain or clouds or hail or strong winds or turbulence or dust or smoke. Plus, I don't like heights, of course, and I don't like flying over water. So, what's the flight?
Okay.
Flying over the water. So, most of the flight was about a mile or so out to sea at 1,000 or 1,500 feet above the ocean, but close enough to glide back to land. And as you appreciate, in the northern part of Australia, it's not a good idea to land in the ocean because we have crocodiles, we have sharks, we have Portuguese men of war jellyfish. So that's the other
Yeah.
thing. You're constantly looking for places to land that are safe to land. And so it wasn't working out. I felt like these progress. Some other highlights, I think I also tell people that during this flight, I encountered weather that I had to cope with because I'm not instrument rated, I'm not commercial. So as I was coming around the coast, the east coast, near August Marlow, I continued around the coast, but there was rain and clouds. And of course, at that stage, the terrain was rising as well. So I basically struck a wall of rain and I thought, no, I'm going to turn back. So I turned back to August Marlow
Yeah.
and landed and thought, okay, I'll wait till it clears up. But it didn't. Even after I took off the next time, I found the same sort of thing. I thought, this is not safe. I have to turn back and give up. So that was my first time of turning back. The next time was further on at Malakuta Inlet. I passed that and same sort of thing as before. And I landed on the airstrip and I was basically aquaplaning on the strip. It was so wet. And then I took off again after waiting. And once again, I had to come back. I just couldn't do anything else. So 2 days where I turned around, it was so depressing because I wasn't making much leeway. There wasn't enough flying done per day. So it got very depressing. And then the other time that I had to turn back was at Warnervale. That's also on the East Coast. I took off. And when I got in the air, the plane was going up and down and side to side. And I thought, I can't cope with this because I have to go past Williamtown airspace at 500 feet. And I don't think that's enough grain because turbulence can drop you quite a long distance. No, I don't want to get my feet wet. So I turned back. Now, I always worried about this because to other people, the day looked like it was a sunny, bright day. Why have you come back and landed? But people don't understand that turbulence isn't visible until you're up there. I spoke to a flight briefing officer a bit later on, and he said, what I encountered was strong turbulence. And he said, if you had continued and the turbulence had increased, the plane could have gone up and you could have come down without your wings. So I'm glad I turned back. So I think that's the important thing too, to let people know. Do not continue if it's unsafe. And if you have to put up with people laughing at you because you've made a life decision, then so be it. So there were the 3 times that I turned around and came back. Now, over the course of the flight, I landed on 75 different airstrips on the mainland and another 15 on the Tasmania stretch. I landed 101 times. And out of those 101 times, because you're probably adding up mentally, ooh, doesn't quite add up, that I had to go backwards and forwards to some places anyway, regardless of turning back. So I tell people, look, out of 101 landings, I got it right. Well, I should say I got it right 98% of the time. So what does that say about life and how we should feel about when we tackle things? Because basically we've got a 50-50 chance of success or failure. For a pilot, you can't stay up in the air forever. You have to come down at some stage. So it's better to land it safely or not land it and crash it and sort of not land, we'll have a crash landing. So you're finished as well as the plane's finished. But basically what I'm telling people is you've got a 50-50 chance. You may as well look on the positive side. And hey, I got it right 98 times out of 101 on airstrips that most of which I'd never seen before. So what's that? If at first you don't succeed, try again, or just keep trying. Because I think, well, particularly for me, because of what's happened in my life, I'm probably a bit underconfident. So I think, well, maybe I won't succeed. But because of the flight and what I've gone through there, I just have turned negatives into positive and say, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to give it a good go. So that's what we should do in life. And if somebody's there in the background telling you, you can't do it, why do you want to do this? Just go ahead and do it anyway. That's the best way to get even with people, succeed. And if it's not exactly the way you planned, well, hey, like I said, I'm here.
That's right. So what would you covered so much in that. summary. So first and foremost, this hostile environment that you were in on your departure, that's a hard way to start anything. With the people around you not supporting you. So there was that. You talked about the weather and then all of these terrible things, terrible foes along the way. The weather, the flying over the water, just all of the things that could go wrong, having to roll your reservations because you've been conservative and made the decision to depart, or just the weather isn't conducive to departing on time. So, looking back at all of those things, what would you tell yourself? What would you right now tell yourself then? Or what would you tell somebody else embarking on an adventure like this? How would you what would you do differently, or how would your attitude shift?
Well, as I mentioned in the reading, it is so important to have a team, because when you see some of these other adventurers, they don't tell you how many people are out there supporting. So it's important to have a team, but I was not cluey enough to be able to get a team. I'm not saying that people didn't support me as I went along, and but it's not the same as having a team dedicated to what you're doing.
Right,
It's different.
right.
Get yourself a manager. I tried to do the publicity, and I think this is one of the reasons why my flight hasn't been known about, because obviously I actually find it distasteful to ring up people and say, hey, I've done this, that, and the other, because it's just like blowing up my bag, and I don't like that. So
Right.
you need to have somebody who's doing the publicity, who's arranging things. It would be nice just to get in an aircraft and fly, and that's all you had to worry about. But I had all these other things because I thought, well, Pelican's Progress did it. I should be able to do it. And it just didn't work out. So
Yeah.
you do need a team. You do need sponsorship. Because when I was doing this, I also had the financial worry, because I had to borrow money, and it took me several years to pay all that back. And while I was doing the adventure,
Wow.
because I'd given up my job, I wasn't earning any money at all for 3 months. So there's that financial
Right.
pressure as well. So, but having said all this, I think it's important for people to realise that even if you are on a shoestring budget and you don't have all your ducks in a row or everything perfect before you leave on your flight or whatever it is, still have a guide, because at least one of the things that I can really take away from this journey is that I'm not looking back on my life and saying, oh, I wish I'd flown around the coast. I can say, I've done it. I don't wish I'd done
That's right.
something. I actually did it. It was hard,
That's right.
but I didn't receive the recognition that I thought I should. But maybe that's partly my fault because of contacting people. Now, I did contact
Yeah.
the TV station, and I was told that's not newsworthy for TV. Go talk to the radio. I rang up a women's magazine, and the attitude was, who do you think you are? So it's it's
Oh, I
very
absolutely 100% agree. Now, okay, hold on. I absolutely 100% agree that what you needed was a promoter. You needed a manager to sell that. Yeah, I mean, that kind of is true of books as well, because I've actually helped authors try and plan book tours and stuff, and it's easier if somebody else is promoting you.
well,
There's just something strange about that, isn't there? Yeah.
there is. But I've also
Yeah, that's
had people say, because I will always say, because my flight wasn't like Pelican's Progress and the weather wasn't the same as Pelican's Progress, I became very dispirited and stressed. And so I thought the solution to that was having some company in the aircraft. So for some of the flight, I did have a couple of my friends come for different legs. And then I also picked up total strangers, which I would never do with a car, but with a plane, well, that's different, isn't it? Uh, but because I've done that, people have gone and said, well, you didn't do it all solo. And I thought, well, I'm sole pilot in command. I did all the duties
Yeah.
of pilot in command, all the planning, preparation, and so on. So why is there this thing that people think you must fly solo? Because I have come across so many examples. Now, Amelia Earhart went on her last flight with a navigator, Fred Noonan.
Right.
Charles Lindbergh flew with his wife, Anne Morrow Lindbergh. She was also a pilot, and she was a co-pilot on one of his flights. You've got American Wiley Post, and he was accompanied by Australian navigator Harold Gatty in a flight around the world. And that was in 8 days they did that flight. There are other examples of Australians who flew with other men. But I don't ever recall anybody saying, sorry, that achievement is not worthwhile because there were 2 of you in the aircraft, or actually more for some of them.
Right.
So there's this perception that flying solo is necessarily harder than flying with someone else.
We just had a conversation about this with Tracy Curtis Taylor, who we discussed her book Bird, and Tracy flew an American war aircraft, the Stearman, but she followed the routes both to Australia and to South Africa, and she did it with a team. And it became a big controversy for her, where she was accused of whatever by an aero club in the UK and somebody who had an issue with her. And listen, I mean, I'm not like the most experienced pilot in the world. I have around 3,000 hours, a lot of them in helicopters, flying 500 feet, 300 feet over the coastline. So I've seen a lot of what you've seen in Australia here in the United States. And I haven't been solo, and I fly recreationally all the time now. I have all kinds of bucket list things like you. I went soaring last Saturday. I did my tail wheel. I did my seaplane, and I haven't been solo in a plane since 1999. So,
Oh.
like solo by myself, nobody else. I went single pilot in the helicopter with a flight mechanic in the back, but I wasn't completely alone. So I'm kind of with you on that. I like having another person there. I think it's just good safety to have another person in the aircraft. But I also respect the idea, and I'm sure I'll go solo somewhere. But yeah, I think it's ridiculous to diminish your accomplishment that way and all of the work that went into it. You know, all of the planning and all of the judgment. You were still making all of those decisions. So props to you for doing that. And I'm sorry that you encountered that criticism.
Well, just continuing that, I made this flight in 2002 where I called it Sea, Sky and Sand. So it's flying over the sea and then flying along the coast and over the inland. So it was around South Australia, and it was to celebrate the year of the Outback and the 200th anniversary of the navigators, vendors and border in the sailing ships. And because I'd done this flight, Aus Flight, it was just so peaceful on my own. Because what people don't realise, when you have someone sitting in the next seat to you, you have actually got more responsibility for another person's life. So that in itself can be a stressor because you don't want to do silly things. However,
That's fair.
friends are one thing because they've chosen to come flying with me, so that's good. and they respected my age and my ability, because when I started this flight, I was 46. So that's another thing. I'm going to digress because I'm all over the shop, so don't worry about this. I just say to my friends,
It's
keep
okay.
up, keep up. But adventuring and following dreams isn't just for young people. It's for any age. If you've got a dream, find a way to pursue it. So there's that aspect. So I was 46, not a young person. Getting back to the person in the right-hand seat. Friends, fine. Total strangers. Now, when you have a male sitting in the right-hand seat, the tendency is to tell you how to fly the aircraft. And particularly if it's a pilot, male or female, they cannot help telling you how to fly the aircraft. So for a lot of people,
Yeah.
I think it was disrespecting my age and my knowledge, and also because I'm just a private pilot, not a commercial pilot. So there's that sort of aspect that comes into it too. So once again, it's just reinforcing this message that why do people think solo is so great and flying with someone in the aircraft diminishes all the work?
Yeah. Yeah. Unfair. So you've kind of hit on a few things. I want to talk about this book itself. So the whole reason we're here, I would call this like a little bit of travelogue, a little bit of life wisdom. It's not a full accounting of the trip. So tell me why you decided to write it, why you decided to publish it, and and you still have it available in ebook for people to download in a PDF. And who do you hope reads it and why?
Well, you've mentioned quite a few things there. When I came back from the flight, I started speaking to people, clubs, and so on. And then people kept saying, you've got beautiful photos, and we've looked at the DVD going on the screen behind you. We want something to take away. So that's why I started to do the book. And I thought, I've read over my diary. I really don't think people want to know all this nitty-gritty stuff. But the other reason too, because I couldn't find a publisher, nobody was interested. And I don't know whether that was because I didn't receive enough publicity about the flight and I was really a nobody, or whether they just didn't think aviation was a hit. I don't know. So I decided to self-publish. I decided rather than have a book that's mostly print with just a few black and white photos, I thought, I want to share this. This is a beautiful country. It's so varied. I don't think I want to go that road anyway. And because I was self-publishing, I also had to think of the cost. So I was telling my friend yesterday, 64 pages was about all I could afford with the coloured
Yeah.
photographs. And I wanted the
Yep.
coloured photographs because I want people to see not only what a woman can achieve, but what a pilot can achieve, male or female, and follow the dream. And the dream is beautiful. And I've learnt to turn negatives into positives because of this. So it has been life-changing. So with the book, I got a quote and I managed to pay for 1,000 copies. So as you can see by this, where are we? It's very well worn because that's my only copy. I sold out of all the other copies. So that's why I'm not
Oh,
going into
wow.
printing. Yes, but that's over quite a few years. And that's what helped pay for the flight. I had to pay for the flight somehow. So in doing this, I thought this is something that people can just pick up, put in their bag, then take it out. And I don't have to keep track of where I am in the journey. It's just picking out the highlights, because I actually, in preparing for this chat, I found my diary and I was reading through it and I thought, oh, no, I couldn't put that out. It would just be too boring. So I've picked out the highlights and things I think are the gems of wisdom. And it is speaking from the position of a person who is not super confident, I think. And that's because of all the other stuff that's been going on in my life. But I thought, this is the best way to get it across. Now, I put my friend under pressure yesterday and I said, can you read this for me? Oh, it won't take long, but it actually did take a bit longer. And it was interesting what she said, because she's not a pilot and she has heard me talk about the flight over the years. And she said, you know what? I didn't know exactly what you'd achieved. But when I read your account, I feel like I'm in the plane, being there with you, experiencing it. I thought, oh, fabulous. And then she said,
Nice.
I also like the bit at the end where you've put all the details about, okay, 145 hours of sitting in the aircraft. Obviously, that's over 3 months. So it wasn't straight off. So you've landed on all these airstrips. You've had to do all this paperwork, which I might add, I don't think you have to do these days, do you? Because we've got all this technology. And so all that would have gone out the window. And speaking about that, I'm going off at a tangent again. I remember reading in the book about Laurie Bonney that she flew in an open cockpit plane, obviously, and she was looking at a map. Next minute, there it went.
Out the window.
So
yep, I could see that.
That once again brings us to the photographing, and that's why I put a lot of the photos in the book, as much as I could afford. And I say to people, look, I really hate housework, but every day that I flew, I had to clean the windscreen inside and out and the window inside and out. And I was determined I was not going to open the window and have something fly out. But with the camera,
Yeah, for sure.
I had to have it close enough to focus on the outside, but not close enough to hit the window, because obviously every time you hit the plane window, it leaves a mark. So doing this, and I keep saying to people, look, the airplane had no air conditioning, no autopilot, no parachute, no toilet. I have to tell you the toilet story too. And that's something I had to live with. But lots of things, I'm juggling all this, but hey, Pelican's Progress did all this. I should be able to do it too. So with the book, I've had really good people to deal with at the printers, because they gave me the writing style. I wrote it. No one edited it. I didn't get an editor, but I got my sister, who is a non-pilot, and I got another pilot to read it so that it made sense, not being too technical, but readable. And as I said, I put in all my weird sense of humour, little pilot to passenger jokes, because it may not seem very funny at the time when these things happened, and it certainly wasn't for a lot of them. But that's the reason why I called it Plane Reflections, because reflecting back on it, I could see the funny side, but I couldn't see them at the time. So before I actually went on the flight, I was going to say fright, I took my friends over to Kangaroo Island, and that was my first lot of flying over the water. Well, that's about 10 nautical miles, not very far at all. And so it was my friends and their grandson. So usually when I fly, I attract bad weather. So it was raining. But there was enough time to refuel the plane, and then started raining again. So I thought, okay, we'll go inside. So we ate some chocolate cake and some cashews, and then it cleared up enough. Now, do you know what a mud map is? No. Okay. Maybe it's an Australian thing. A mud map just means if somebody tells you how to get to a place, you write a diagram, and that's the map. Just a very quick map of how to get somewhere. So this is a different idea of that. So I took off from Naracoorte, flying under the clouds, and my young passenger next to me, after we'd struck some turbulence, he looked a bit green, and I thought, okay, I'll just keep on flying. Then we struck some more turbulence, and then bang! Oh my God, what's happened? Have I hit a bird or something? No, he'd been looking at me, and I had regurgitated chocolate cake over my cap, my glasses, in
Oh,
my ear, my clothing, and on my map was my map. But it was a mud map full of regurgitated chocolate
oh,
cake. So I tell you what, there was a mad scramble to find tissues to wipe things up. And I thought, well, I have to
oh,
keep on flying. There's nowhere to land. So we finally landed at Gore, and we got some hot chicken bags from the Aero Club, and we took those. And he was sick a couple more times as we were going over to Kangaroo Island. So basically, we had a lot of sick jokes all weekend. And I tell the kids absolutely love it because they call it the vomit story. So I keep saying to people, well, it was good that he was sick over me because he wasn't sick over the instrument panel, which would have been horrific. And then it's fresh.
sure.
It didn't have time to acquire a nice mature smell. So I do. And if I could fly under these circumstances with sick all over me, surely I could fly around Australia. So that's it.
That's it. You pass that test, you can do anything. Oh, that's terrible. So this has been awesome. So I think you probably already know this, but I know that the 99s are planning a meeting in Australia. I think, is it in 26 or 27?
I'm not sure.
Are you tracking? I think it's I think it's in 27. So I hope that people listening to this, any of our 99s who are going to go on that trip, have an opportunity to meet you. I don't know if I'm going to make it because I already went a few years ago, and I don't know if I can get away with a second trip without my husband. So I might not be able to make it to see you on that trip. We'll see. But in the meantime, for people who want a chance to read your lovely little book, where can they find it?
Well, it's on Etsy. So if they just go to my website, which is www.franwest.com, there is a link that takes you to the Etsy site where Plane Reflections is available as a download. And you can either type in Fran West on Etsy and Plane Reflections, and that should just take you there if you're Googling it. So I am working on another book at the moment that will probably be linked in a little bit with Plane Reflections. Back in 2019, I drove over to Western Australia and I was visiting some of the places that I landed and also a lot of the places that I flew over. So it's called On Wings and Wheels. So comparing the flight, what you see from a plane, what you see from the ground. So there's fors and against flying and driving and so on. So that will be with a whole lot of coloured photographs, a bit of comparison with this. As I said, this is the printers were really great with this because they gave me so much help. They didn't write it for me, but you do have to be careful editing, and you have to get other people to read it and have their comments because it's invaluable if you can't get a publisher. And now we've got so many ways of getting out there with PDFs, ebooks, downloads of anything,
Absolutely.
whatever. So it's much easier this time of life to publish things in different ways if you can't get a publisher.
Absolutely, I agree, and I love the advice to get an editor. Please, definitely, for anybody who's publishing, because that gives us an opportunity for our stories to reach a broader audience.
I've been writing a children's book about Kylie the flying koala, and that's basically she's my character, and she's flying around the coast. So it started off as a children's picture book, but I'm finding it very hard to get that published. So then I thought maybe I need to write it not as a picture book, but more as a chapter book or a longer book of, say, 2,000 words or more. But that just detailed some of the things that happened to me. And of course, I've chosen a koala because I live in the Adelaide Hills and I have koalas visiting me. So a natural fit. But yes, I've got lots of things on the go, but I don't think I'm going to fit everything in this one night.
You know what? Neither am I, but I like your style. You're doing as much as you can. This has been absolutely lovely, Fran. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your story and for having the courage to do something so brave and so adventurous, and then to leave us with this little gem of a book to commemorate it and enjoy some of your humor and your wisdom and just a little bit about the trip. It's beautiful.
Thank you.